Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville, and I invite everybody to join Council in O Canada. Please rise. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, do we have regrets for this evening?
Yes, we have regrets this evening from Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. Council, I'd like to ask you to confirm or correct, whichever is your pleasure, the minutes of previous council meetings as listed in the agenda in front of you. Councillor Adams? Councillor Adams moves confirmation. Is there a second? Councillor Lischina, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. We now have a public presentation. The town staff will present council with the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities Program Achievement of Milestone 5 from ICLEI. And if you'll give your attention to Ms. Toth, she can update you on the latest dividend from your farsighted decision many years ago to join ICLEI.
Staff would like to present to Council the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities Program Achievement of Milestone 5 from ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. The town has continued to make great progress in implementing our climate change strategy, following the ICLEI Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities 5 Milestone Framework. To recognize this accomplishment, ICLEI has awarded the town Milestone 5. The town of Oakville is one of 2 of 19 participating municipalities that has reached this capstone, demonstrating the town's environmental leadership. This places the town at the forefront of municipalities in Canada working to mitigate and adapt to climate change by consistent dedication to planning and action to increase the town's resiliency. As a result, Oakville can be seen as a municipal leader nationally for our ongoing and determined efforts to address climate change. And it's a modest plaque reflecting great achievements.
Thank you very much. Council is very pleased and proud of staff's work on this file for us and the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next part of the agenda, Council, is we have 2 delegations. We have a delegation from Chris Schafer, the Public Policy Manager for Uber Canada, and he's appearing on the Transportation Network Company Licensing Bylaw, which is item 10 on the Administrative Services Committee agenda that will be before us momentarily. Mr. Schafer, would you like to come to the podium and share your information with Council and the public?
See it, thanks. I'm used to the Google version of this. I'm trying to get it to play here. Haven't used PowerPoint in a while. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and staff. As many of you know, my name is Chris Schafer, and I'm Public Policy Manager with Uber Canada. I was here before committee last week with about a dozen or so Uber driver partners, many of whom had the opportunity to address committee, share with committee members present their experience as Uber driver partners in the town of Oakville, why they like the opportunity to earn some supplementary income around a flexible schedule of their own making. I plan to address you for the time I have, basically just to reiterate a few points that were made at committee for the benefit of those who weren't at committee, in addition to some new information with respect to some of the items I'll be covering this evening. Bottom line, Uber Canada and myself on behalf of Uber Canada, supportive of this staff report and draft bylaw before you. I've outlined a few concerns in written material I've shared with council members predating this evening, and I'll outline some of that briefly here this evening, and of course look forward to any questions that you might have. Just to reiterate before we begin, in the staff report, you would have seen polling that was done by staff with respect to the issue of Uber and ride sharing in the town of Oakville. Broad support, the range of about 73 to 75% across all wards with the exception of one, and I'm going by memory, but I believe it was Ward 2, where majority support was still 54%, but lower than the 73 to 75% we see in wards across the town of Oakville. So consistent with other polling I've seen in cities, regions across Canada. So Oakville's no different in that respect. Broad, strong support. This table in front of you may look overwhelming at first glance. Just one simple observation I'll make on this table is I think Oakville's has an advantage in terms of other municipalities. It's had the opportunity to sort of sit back and see what other cities and regions across Canada have done with respect to the issue of Uber and ride sharing. And the one observation I'd make is that the draft bylaw before you this evening for your consideration is consistent, almost uniformly so, with bylaws that have been passed to date in Edmonton to address ride sharing and Uber, Toronto, Ottawa, Niagara region, Waterloo region. London and Windsor I could have easily added to this table. They have draft bylaws before committee and council. They have not yet passed them, but very, very consistent with what you see in the table before you. On the left-hand side, you've got many of the issues that make up the meat, if you like, of draft bylaw, the components. And you can see uniformity across the board with respect to what Oakville has proposed in a draft bylaw. So again, supportive of the work of staff and the draft bylaw. Right now, I'll spend briefly in the time I have left addressing some concerns with the draft bylaw, but again, significant support from Uber in terms of what the bylaw is proposing to do in terms of regulation. Point out the issue of vehicle age limit. In the cities that have and regions that have passed bylaws to date, the maximum vehicle age, with the exception of Toronto, to be fair, is 10 years or higher. And the reason the cities and regions have come to that conclusion is for a number of reasons. For example, the fact modern manufacturing techniques in cars nowadays allows them to have a longer lifespan. There is the annual vehicle inspection, safety standards certificate. It's an MTO in vehicle inspection, the same one that staff here is proposing to be adopted in the bylaw. That is consistent, so there's an annual vehicle inspection. There's the ability of bylaw to do the spot inspections in terms of that may necessitate a vehicle inspection. The beauty of a TNC, a Transportation Network Company platform, is after each ride, a driver can provide real-time written feedback through the app, monitored and responded to by Uber 24 hours a day. So if there was an issue such as a damaged windshield, a missing tail light, some other concerns about the blinking light on a dashboard or sound of an engine, we get that feedback and can act on that in real time. So again, with all of those elements, very briefly, a number of the cities, as you can see, have landed at a 10-year maximum. In terms of my suggestion to council, if I can be so bold, is to have council tonight consider an amendment to the draft bylaw that would put the Oakville bylaw on the same sort of level footing with other municipalities at a 10-year vehicle age maximum. Staff at committee noted that the taxi bylaw allows taxi vehicles currently to apply for an exemption to the 7-year maximum that's in the taxi bylaw. That could have those vehicles be 8, 9, or up to 10 years as well. So the easiest thing might be to just create a standard at 10 years and adopt the same standard when considering potential taxi bylaw reform in 2017, 2018, when staff are looking at that next year. Moving on. Oops. Oh, there we go. Demerit points very quickly. As you can see in the excerpts of the bylaw language provided, most municipalities, with the exception of Waterloo Region, have landed at a threshold of less than 9 demerit points. So 8 or fewer is okay. 9 or more is not okay. The Oakville bylaw draft is proposing 8 or less. 7 or less. So it can't be 8, but it can be 7 or less. That is slightly inconsistent with most bylaws to date in my reading of the bylaw language. Just to give you a little bit more background information in terms of demerit points, already outside of a regulatory framework, you can see that a major MVR, motor vehicle reference check, of any of these varieties, I won't read them all, but careless driving, failed to remain at the scene of an accident. There's many there listed. It's an automatic violation. Any of those on an MVR, driver abstract, would mean you're banned from the Uber platform, period, regardless of demerit points accumulated. And then any more than 3 minor violations in the last 2 years, and you can see I won't read them all, I don't have time for that, but there's many there, including, these are all minor violations as well. Regardless of how many demerit points that accumulates, 3 of those in the time period specified in the last slide, and I'm not sure I can go back to it, but will mean an automatic violation of the, perfect. That's some fancy technology, yes. Now, so any 3 minor violations the last 2 years of that minor category there would mean an automatic disqualification. So what I'd again, if I can be bold to suggest is, at the very least, council would just keep the draft bylaw as is if they don't have comfort around considering a change, or if there is comfort, consider where most municipalities have landed, and that is 8 or less is okay in terms of demerit points. Anything higher than 9 or higher would not be okay. Oakville is recommending 7 or less. I'm suggesting 8 or less is okay. So just the 1 demerit point difference. At the very least, keep the bylaw consistent if that is not the will of council. Last point, again, is the 2 minutes I have left. TNC fees, we take no issue with the cities, regions, towns collecting the cost of regulatory compliance. That's perfectly okay with Uber, perfectly within your right. The only concern I raise is the quantum noted in comparison to the population sizes of Oakville, in comparison to some of the other cities and regions before us. The quantums to be collected for a town the size of Oakville in comparison to other places that have passed bylaws, in my mind, is either puts them at a point where they exceed the amount other cities and regions are collecting, or come very close to collecting what significantly larger regions like Waterloo Region and Edmonton's collecting. The beauty of a per trip fee is it can be adjusted. So if there's a comfort or a lack of comfort that the city or the town, will recoup the cost of regulatory compliance, in 2018, after the year of operation of the bylaw, there'd be an opportunity for staff to suggest an increase in the 11 cents, perhaps to 12, 13 cents, in order to not only recoup the cost for 2018, but to recoup the costs if we were short for 2017. So that's the beauty of a per trip fee added on at the end. So you have the annual fee plus a per trip fee. So what I would consider, maybe if I can again be so bold, is have council maybe ask staff to monitor for a year the annual fee and per trip fee, and come back maybe in 2018 and talk about whether in fact the fees were set too high maybe for the cost of regulatory compliance, and to suggest a lower annual fee, one that I've suggested maybe in the range of $7,500 to $20,000, or maybe in fact come back to you in a year and say they weren't collecting enough, maybe, if that's the case. But I suspect, based on our modeling that we do in over 450 cities around the world in which we operate, that you'll be within your range of regulatory compliance. Thank you very much. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schafer, for bringing your committee comments to council. Council, are there questions for Mr. Schafer? Councillor Lischina.
Mr. Schafer, thank you for your presentation. You had indicated that 13% of the drivers, if the car is less than 7 years, would be not allowed to drive in Oakville. Can you comment on the percentage of drivers if they were more than 7 demerit points? How many, what the percentage of those drivers would be taken off the road here in our town?
Through you, Mr. Chair, because that question came up at committee, I know you were here, you might recall a committee member, I can't remember who, but somebody had asked about that data, and I did go back as I had undertook to do, and because drivers already, our policy outside of a particular bylaw requirement, right now there's a proposed bylaw requirement in Oakville, we don't have one, so our policy is no more than 9, so you could have 8 or fewer. The challenge is when we don't have some of that data in terms of where it would exclude. So I wasn't able to collect in a ready manner that data. So I don't have that answer. I suspect...
What about the 8 demerit points? Would you have that data?
I don't have that with me. What I do suspect it would be somewhere along the lines of a small percentage of drivers. Most of our drivers would be okay, I suspect, to be honest.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for coming back to Council, Mr. Schafer. I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is a follow-up to a question that I asked at committee, and I know that staff have some issues around this one as well, but the issue of allowing taxi drivers, existing licensed taxi drivers, to also be licensed as Uber. You expressed a concern because you don't want people hailing Ubers, etc., at the meeting. And so to follow up on that question, I've done a little bit of research and discovered your product called Uber Taxi. And I'm wondering what Uber Taxi is and why you couldn't allow our existing taxi operators, should they choose to become TNC operators too, to also, under your rules, and I know it's an issue with staff as well, and Jim's smiling at me, but at least from an Uber perspective, what is the distinction? What is Uber Taxi, and is there some way to bridge this gap?
Through you, Mr. Chair, good question. I'll touch, before I talk about specifically on Uber Taxi, I'll touch just to reiterate some of the quick comments I made at committee with respect to that question. So the reason I suggested that there might be a concern is that UberX is peer-to-peer ride sharing. It's not a taxi vehicle with the dome light on it as we traditionally know it. It's could be my dad with his car, assuming he's passed through the onboarding process and pass a background check, vehicle inspection, etc. Could be his Toyota Camry. Because UberX vehicles, the only way to secure an Uber ride is through the app, we don't, even with a bylaw requirement, we don't street hail. So you can't get an Uber by waving your arm. You can't phone for an Uber. You have to go through the app itself. The challenge with, and what I suggested at committee was, if a taxi driver wanted to use a taxi vehicle but on the UberX peer-to-peer ride-sharing platform, the challenge would be is that might encourage someone, if they saw what looked like a taxi, traditional taxi, that may be moonlighting in the evening, perhaps he or she's done her taxi shift for the day and wants to drive for UberX and use that taxi vehicle with all the traditional markings on it. It may encourage someone, in fact, to try to violate the bylaw by street hailing, because they see a taxi, they don't know if it's an UberX at that point or a taxi. They might want to street hail that taxi, and that would be in violation of the proposed terms of the bylaw here. And actually, you can't secure an UberX that way. You can only get it through the app. Now, your second question is the Uber Taxi product category on the Uber app. Now, Oakville, we only operate UberX. Toronto and Montreal are obviously two larger cities. They've had Uber for a longer period of time, going now for about 4 years, give or take on my rough mental math. Going by memory, it's about 4 years. 4 years goes back far enough in time, Uber being about 6 years old. far enough back in time that UberX peer-to-peer ride-sharing didn't even exist at the time. You could only use the Uber app to secure either a licensed limousine product or a licensed taxi product, Uber Black being the limo, Uber Taxi being the taxi. As such, they're legacy products, if you like. There's a company, Lyft, in the United States that introduced essentially what is modern-day peer-to-peer ride-sharing. Once they rolled that product out, Uber quickly, as a competitive pressure, rolled out a product known as UberX, introduced that in the US market. As such, Uber Taxi is in many respects only available in Toronto, Montreal as a legacy product from a period of time that predates ride-sharing UberX.
So your argument with respect to your concern being that somebody would hail a taxi cab, believing it, even though it's licensed as Uber, what difference does that make to you as Uber? Because if they're a licensed taxi cab, then under our bylaw, they're allowed to be hailed. So why are you concerned about that? As a competitive issue?
No, through Chair, to your question. So I have no issue at all with a particular driver that drives a taxi during the day and maybe on, let's say, his shift, and I don't know what the taxi shifts are in Oakville, but let's assume it's for a 12-hour shift Monday to Friday. And on the weekend says, you know what, I have some spare time, I would like to supplement my income around my own schedule. UberX and Uber looks attractive to me. Comes in, onboards, and has a personal family vehicle with none of the taxi markings on it, wants to drive for Uber and passes through all the requirements of the potential bylaw we might consider passing this evening. I have no issue with that. In fact, there's lots of taxi drivers in Toronto and other cities that do exactly that. The concern, I think, and I can't speak on behalf of staff, but a concern I think they would have is that a taxi vehicle with all the markings of a traditional taxi on the UberX platform may encourage people to hail it down, and then that driver may be encouraged, again hypothetically, to accept a cash fare which would be outside the bounds of the way in which Uber already operates, but also outside the bounds of the bylaw requirements for an UberX TNC operation not to accept cash or be street hailed.
Thank you, Mr. Schafer. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you.
Councillor Lischina.
Mr. Schafer, can you clarify, so I did see the taxi app here on your Uber platform in Oakville. So if someone actually hit that, they would say, sorry, does not exist?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, to my knowledge, Uber Taxi does not operate in Oakville. So I'd have to pull up the app. I'm almost sure it does not. I know it does operate in the city of Toronto as a legacy product. I didn't go far enough to hit it, but I did see. Okay, I don't believe. I can check right now as we're talking and answering questions. I'm going to pull it up. To my knowledge, it is not available in Oakville outside of Toronto. But I could stand to be corrected. I'm checking right now.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This question actually is of staff. So when
Are there any more questions for Mr. Schafer? Mr. Schafer, thank you very much for your time and your information. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I don't know who the staff person should be that I direct this to. Would it be you, Ms. Lozey?
Actually, Jim Berry is here. He's the Director of Municipal Enforcement. He may be better to answer that question.
Okay. I wasn't at the last ASC meeting because I was at the CSC meeting and left after the CSC meeting was over. So I didn't have the benefit of a lot of debate or questions and things of that nature that I'm just getting tonight. And at the meeting, to what extent was the demerit, the 9 demerit point thing debated? What was said about it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to try and encapsulate the discussion that we had, I think the conversation was around the static number provided in the draft or proposed TNC bylaw is 7. In the taxi bylaw, we have a graduated numbering system. So if you have 6 demerit points, you get a letter. If you have, and sorry, I'm going from memory, but if you have 7 or 8, you have an interview, and then at 9, I believe your license is suspended. So there's a bit of a process in the taxi, whereas we have a static number in the TNC. And I think what we discussed, or some of the discussion of the committee, was that whole demerit point system would be reviewed as we look at the taxi system, as we look at the taxi bylaw over next year.
But the committee, I believe, obviously approved your recommendation. Nine demerit points? Is that what it was? Is that the way you describe it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's 7 or less they can have. As soon as they hit 8, they wouldn't be permitted to operate a TNC vehicle.
But it seems to me then, let me try it another way. It seems to me that Uber is asking tonight for a change that wasn't there for them last week, but now they're asking for a change already, and the paint's hardly dry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Schafer did ask for the same concession or change in the bylaw at committee, and from staff's perspective, we still feel that the number is appropriate in the bylaw, and again, we will be reviewing the demerit system in the taxi bylaw as we go forward.
Well, I think that's fine, but he wanted to change something tonight that was approved last week, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was their request.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson, thank you. All righty then. Our next delegation is Mary Marshall with regard to Oakville Transit on the Budget Committee agenda of November 22nd and reconvened on November 24th. Ms. Marshall? Ms. Marshall, is Mary Marshall here? All right. Well, I know that everybody on the Budget Committee and the councillors who attended remember the delegation very well and had it in mind as we deliberated. Council, we now come to the standing committee reports, and the first listed in the agenda are the committee reports of the 2016 Budget Committee for the 2017 year budget, and I would propose to recognize the Budget Committee Chair to make a presentation on the budget for you and the public. I'm having technical.
Thank you, everybody. On behalf of the Budget Committee, I'd like to share a few words about the recommended 2017 budget. Oakville ranks at the top of the list when measuring municipal fiscal health. University of Toronto Professor Enid Slack's 2015 book, Is Your City Healthy? Measuring Urban Fiscal Health, looked at elements of fiscal health for cities across Ontario. Slack is Canada's top academic expert on municipal finances. Her book explores ways to measure fiscal health, and her book lists Oakville as the municipality in Ontario with the highest fiscal health. Oakville's fiscal health was, in fact, 32% stronger than the second-place city. The findings that led Slack to rank Oakville as number 1 included debt-to-tax ratios, low tax arrears, revenue-raising capacity, estimates of the fiscal gap, and other financial factors that are detailed in the book. With the highest rating for financial health, Oakville is well placed to meet the financial and service needs of our community now and into the future. This means, as an Oakville resident, you can continue to feel confident in the high level of services and programs that the town provides, as well as our fiscal health. As a council, we'll continue to keep finances strong and stable and property tax increases in line with inflation. Together, we can be sure to keep our number 1 ranking for municipal fiscal health. As I share my comments about the hard work that's gone into these recommendations, I'd like you to consider our strong financial position and the opportunity that this financial stewardship gives our community both now and into the future, to determine the kind of town that our residents want for the next generation. Among other things, our finances have provided us the ability to provide Oakville with a brand new hospital, high-quality programs and services, and infrastructure that's maintained on a timely basis. Members of council will remember that council gave staff a guideline of preparing a budget with the overall tax increase in line with inflation for 2017. And the same direction was given for the 2018 budget. The 2017 recommended budget meets this guideline. The recommended Town of Oakville property tax increase is 3.21%, which when combined with the expected region of Halton and education portions of the property tax increase creates an overall property tax increase of 1.99%, which is lower than the latest Toronto Consumer Price Index of 2.3% and just above the Bank of Canada's core inflation index for all of Canada. Forecasts for 2017 and for 2018 also project inflation around 2%. Our property taxes are made up of town, regional, and educational components. Each municipality has a unique breakdown. Some are single-tier, and others, like us, are two-tier municipalities. As a result, comparing tax increases from one municipality to another can be difficult, and that's why reviewing and managing overall increases, including all three of these components, helps to create consistency in comparison. As a lower-tier municipality, the town is one portion of the overall tax bill, representing here approximately 40%. The remaining 60% is levied on behalf of the region and the province for education purposes. The budget presented today focuses on the 40% share of the overall bill, and when combined with the region and education gives you the overall increase residents will see on their tax bill and reflects the cost of providing all municipal services similar to a single-tier municipality such as Toronto, Hamilton, or Guelph. 7 out of 13 of us also serve on the Halton Region Council, where we each have a vote on the budget there. And that budget will be seen on Wednesday this week. The 2017 recommended budget is recommending the lowest increase among our neighbors. In fact, I believe this is now the third year straight where the Budget Committee has recommended to you the lowest increase among our neighbors. These figures are all from approved or forecasted budgets for 2017 and are presented on comparable bases. I'd note that the higher figures for the other municipalities show the pressure they're facing as they attempt to deal with unfunded infrastructure pressures. As they attempt to deal with the renewal needs of their communities and construction needs, they're likely to continue to outpace inflation for the future years. Mississauga and Brampton, for example, here you see at the bottom, both now have 2% annual capital levies to close their infrastructure gaps. Oakville, by contrast, has an asset management plan that's well funded, and we're recommending this to be the final year for the special road resurfacing increases that we've seen over the last few years. I also want to highlight that a number of municipalities have not yet announced their 2017 expectations, such as Hamilton. These municipalities will only be approving budgets part way into 2017, and I want to commend you for being prepared to pass your budget tonight. This is a good governance practice that gives your staff direction regarding the level of resources available to them for the entire year. In fact, Halton Region was recently given the highest marks for its budgeting process by C.D. Howe Institute. And while Oakville wasn't looked at specifically in that study, I'll tell you that our process closely mirrors the process used by Halton Region, and we too would be top of class based on the criteria used in that ranking. I also want to highlight the introduction of other types of fees in the GTA that are making tax comparisons more difficult over time. Mississauga has introduced a stormwater charge, and as you know, Toronto has for a number of years had the municipal land transfer tax, and Toronto is also in possession of a waste management fee and is now considering additional taxes, higher land transfer taxes, and road tolls, and all of these differences make it more difficult over time to compare. We're proud to be preserving important services for our local families and building and maintaining our infrastructure, unlike some jurisdictions where infrastructure funding is inadequate to repair aging roads, sewers, and other facilities. Some highlights of the Budget Committee recommendations are listed here. They include funds for the cultural programs, additional funds for the heritage grants and tourism. Importantly, they include bringing forward $500,000 in additional funds from 2018 and 2019 for road resurfacing. In addition to improving our roads earlier, this will also provide relief to taxpayers in future years. We're also recommending inclusion of projects subject to federal support under the Clean Water and Wastewater Program, and we're very thankful to the federal government for their ongoing support for municipal infrastructure, and we look forward to continuing to work with them on other opportunities in the future. The recommended budget also provides support for the Canadian Open. It provides for ward-by-ward communications by council members and town-wide communications by the mayor. It also transfers significant funds to our reserves for use in stabilizing our taxes in future years as we move towards the opening of both the new community centers in South Oakville as well as the new fire station in North Oakville in the upcoming foreseeable future. We're keeping our municipal house in order. Through the ongoing discipline of our annual 1% capital levy and the additional funds this council has added over the years for the annual paving levy, we now have high-quality infrastructure. Our funding for infrastructure renewal puts us in a very unique position among municipalities. In fact, our funding for replacing aging infrastructure more than matches its rate of depreciation without the need for issuing debt. I know of no other municipalities who are in this very, very enviable position. Our neighboring municipalities are issuing significant amounts of debt in order to maintain their existing infrastructure beyond that they might need for new infrastructure. This debt is limiting their future ability to make choices about what kind of community they want in the future. Oakville's financial health is strong and sustained with respect to its debt. Our recommendations advocate appropriate debt management, and only 3% of our debt is supported by property taxes. Our hospital debt is being supported by non-tax revenue at Oakville Enterprises Corporation, and development charges, harbors, and the soccer club are supporting other elements of our debt. The recommended $6.1 million in new debt in 2017 is supported by energy savings generated internally by the LED conversion project that the debt is being used for. This is in addition to the $6 million in LED project debt from the 2016 budget. Our plan reduces the remaining tax levy supported debt by an additional $2 million this year to bring it to $4 million. And for the record, that number was 6 times higher at $24 million in 2006. So this council has come a long way with respect to tax supported debt. No debt is required for infrastructure renewal because all of our infrastructure renewal funding policies set aside money for each year of for the replacement of assets as they come to the end of their expected lives. And just for the record, this is the projected 2017 outstanding debt principal for each of our various elements. And I show you there all of those pieces so that you have an understanding of both the tax, the self, and the hospital debt there. Regarding the town portion of the total tax increase, that's the 3.21% figure that you see right down there. That about a third of it relates to maintaining our existing service levels. That's the 1.07% figure. That's a little bit higher up in that table. That's for our base operating budget. About 2/3 of the Oakville increase relates to renewing our infrastructure and stabilizing our taxes for future years. That's the 2.14% you get when you add the 1% capital levy, the 0.14% road resurfacing funding, and the 1% committee referrals that are largely related to bringing forward our road resurfacing funding increases from 2018 and 2019 and adding to our stabilization reserves. And this is funding that we'll be dedicating to ensuring that our infrastructure, A, doesn't crumble, and B, that we create a future of stable and predictable tax levels for future years. And you can see that the overall impact will be 1.99% on the overall bill, which again is the lowest among our local neighbors. The 2017 budget includes total operating expenses of $310 million. I won't go into the detail, but you can see that the majority of the costs relate to services and programs that are used actively in the daily lives of our residents and businesses. They include core services like road maintenance. I think all of us have seen a snowplow today. They include storm sewers, the fire department. They include libraries, parks, transit, many, many others. Citizens need to know that our expenses aren't all paid for by property taxes. Only 58% of our funding comes from property taxes in the upcoming year. And in fact, when I joined council, that number was 66%. A few more of us were around the table at that time as well. Of the $180 million in tax dollars being raised in 2017, the largest share actually goes to renewing our capital infrastructure, followed closely by the fire services. Of the capital funding in 2017, a large portion is for getting around. In fact, road improvement, road maintenance, and transit make up 7 out of 10 of our largest capital projects this year. Our road resurfacing budget will again be the largest in Oakville's history at $9.1 million. Combined with the region and the provincial shares, the currently forecasted overall increases for 2018 and 2019 will be 1.84% and 2.97%. As in previous years, we'll be reviewing the details of these forecasts, and I'm quite confident that as we move forward, we'll be able to improve upon these figures. As a reason for my optimism, I'm going to tell you that last year when we were talking about the 2017 budget, we were forecasting a 2.31% increase for 2017. Today, we're bringing forward a recommendation for 1.99%. Council's already directed staff to prepare the 2018 budget to maintain overall property tax increases in line with inflation, and we're going to continue to work towards that very important goal. The Budget Committee is also recommending that staff be directed to prepare the 2019 and 2020 budgets, keeping overall property tax increases in line with inflation. To that end, staff will be continuing their regular performance-based, program-based budgeting reviews that have, over the years, identified several $1 million in savings. The Budget Committee is also recommending that the CAO be directed to undertake service delivery reviews to optimize the delivery of town programs and services and to consider alternative service delivery models. We'll be working towards further smoothing of our future tax increases as we approach the opening of the new community centers in South Oakville, as well as the new fire station in North Oakville in the 2019 to 2021 timeframes. Finally, the Budget Committee recommendation includes placing significant funds into our stabilization reserves to allow us to reduce that spike that you saw in 2019. We're positioning ourselves very well for those future years. So in summary, I'd like to thank the members of our staff who've spent a great deal of time working on the 2017 budget. In particular, I'd like to thank Gord Lalonde and Nancy Sully, who are here in the audience with us today, for their work during the process. Nancy also has a great team of finance professionals who support both herself and us behind the scenes to make each of our decisions easier and clearer as we go through the process. I'd also like to thank the members of the public who have taken the time to provide us with their thoughts, not only during the budget process, but throughout the year. It's often difficult sometimes to say specifically what discussion made a change in the budget, but I can certainly see the direction being changed over time from those various discussions that we have. Finally, I want to thank each of you, my colleagues, for the trust and support during the budget process. You've all taken a great deal of time to review the budget and take part in a great number of public discussions about the budget. I know each of you have been asked by various members of the public about different parts of the budget. I've seen and heard the various intelligent questions you've asked. I've seen the various things that you've brought forward to the budget discussions, and so throughout that process, you've been representing your constituents very well, and I think Oakville should be proud. I'd like to recognize Mayor Burton, Councillors Elgar, Hutchins, and Robinson for their efforts on the 2017 budget. I'd like to welcome Councillors Giddings, Grant, Elgar, the Mayor, myself back to the 2018 Budget Committee. We have lots more work to do. Your Worship, it would be my pleasure to move the recommendations of the Budget Committee at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there questions for the Budget Chair? Councillor Lapworth.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Adams, for your leadership and direction for the 2017 budget. Also, the members of the Budget Committee, Gordon Lalonde and Nancy Scully. And I'm very happy to see that the town is now being run like a highly financially controlled corporation. And as such, the budget increase is less than or similar to the inflation rate. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other councillors? Councillor Adams, your motion is in order. Is there a second? Councillor Hutchins, is there further discussion?
Yes.
Shall I put the vote? Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, Your Worship, prior to that, I would ask that item number 2 from the December 6th meeting be separated and voted on separately, if that's appropriate.
Item number 2 from December 6th. That's totally appropriate. That's available by request. I'll just pull it out and read it to people. Are you sure it's number 6?
Sorry, the date was December 6th, item number 2.
photo radar.
So it was the Wycroft Bridge.
Ah, this one. So there's actually nothing to vote on there. We're receiving the minutes, and your vote is to receive or reject the minutes.
That's right. So how am I best able to reject that minute for that item?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, would you agree it's an accurate minute?
I would agree it is an accurate minute. So I guess my question then, Your Worship, if you can maybe clarify for me, how do other members of council have any say over an item that's discussed at Budget Committee formally?
Well, I think, if I understand you, well, you haven't really told us what you want to do, but attempting to read your mind, I believe, if I remember your request to the Budget Committee, you wanted the Budget Committee to bring the Wycroft Bridge into the 10-year capital forecast. Is that what you're after here?
At that time, that was my request, yes.
And is that what you'd like to do now?
If that's the option open to me, I will. I was happy to simply settle for not agreeing with the Budget Committee's decision at that time. So
the simple procedure is to bring an amendment to the budget, seeking to add that to the 10-year capital forecast.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, for the procedural clarification.
And because 10 months ago, we unanimously transferred the bridge project to the region, we would first need to move reconsideration. And so your fairly simple and straightforward parliamentary procedure is move a motion to reconsider, and then, if that's successful, move a motion to add the bridge to the 10-year capital forecast.
So then, Your Worship, procedurally, how was that motion allowed to happen at budget then without a motion to reconsider?
The motion didn't carry. I mean,
I'm not asking this motion to carry right now. In fact, I know it won't, but what I'm asking is to have that reflected. And what I'm hearing to you is I need to do a motion to reconsider on a regional issue, but I didn't see that process happen at the budget meeting.
It's a town, committees are not allowed to vote reconsideration.
Okay, then I'll withdraw my comments then, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the clarification on the procedural wherewithal here.
Thank you, Councillor. Anytime I can be helpful, I'm here for you. Shall I put the vote? Then all in favor of the 2017 budget as presented? Thank you, that carries. Committee, I put before you now the next item on the agenda, which is the Community Services Committee report. Is there a mover and seconder for the committee report? Councillor Lischina and Councillor Elgar. All those in favor? And that is carried. The next item is the Administrative Services Committee report, and as I understand it, there's a desire to amend, to make an amendment to the TNC item, which was, I think it was item 10. Thank you. So, so at the request of Councillor Adams, we're separating out item 10 so that he can move an amendment.
So I'd be pleased to move the balance of the committee minutes. And with respect to item number 10, I'd like to move an amendment to add a fourth point, and it's seconded by Councillor Knoll, that staff report back by June 2017 with recommended changes to the taxicab bylaw that can be implemented quickly to provide fair and balanced treatment of the ride-selling market. We had a discussion about a number of different pieces of the bylaw that we felt might be able to move forward before the 2018 timeframe that was in the original recommendation. I did speak with our staff about that, and they feel that they could come forward possibly earlier than June 2017. So I've placed June as the date in the motion, but our staff have suggested that they might be able to come forward sometime during Q2. There is a letter before us that is from one of the members of the the taxi cab industry. It outlines a number of issues and concerns that they have. I suggest that some of those might be things that could be considered within our staff's review.
So thank you, Councillor Adams. I'll put the vote on your amendment first, and I support it. Is there discussion of the proposed amendment? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I just want to thank Councillor Adams for accurately encapsulating, I think, what was probably the biggest part of the conversation at committee the other day, and that is what appears to be a potential substantial disparity between the TNC industry as well as the taxicab business. And while I support this proposal by staff to regulate TNCs, I am very sensitive to the fact that we need to be very cognizant of the fact and the importance that the taxi industry plays in our community to deliver our children to school, to take people to their medical appointments, etc. And we need to be concerned about their viability. And I think that leveling the playing field as much as possible is very important. Now, staff have committed to come back with a taxi bylaw within a year, but I expressed, and a couple of the members of committee and some of the members of the audience expressed concern that may take too long. I think that the commitment from staff to look for some low-hanging fruit opportunities, as well as what Councillor Adams has articulated in this well-crafted motion that we are presenting tonight, will achieve that. And I just ask the taxi industry to be patient while we continue to work through this. And with that, thank you for your time.
Councillor, is that you seconding Councillor Adams's motions?
Absolutely.
There's his amendment and his main motion. All right, Councillor Adams, your motion includes the revisions that you received by memo on your desk?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, then Councillor Robinson.
I just have another question, Your Worship, relative to the other point that I raised. Does this amendment have any bearing or influence on the bylaw that is coming forward to us tonight to pass?
No, it's unrelated to the TNC bylaw specifically. This deals with the taxi cab element of our industry.
So there's no impact there one way or the other?
Not directly, no.
Not directly?
Well, not direct. I can imagine our staff looking at the taxi cab bylaw and then realizing that they should also be recommending something else to us, but.
The amendment as moved has no relationship whatsoever to the TNC bylaw before you, Councillor.
Okay.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Burton. I see from Mr. Gurinder Singh Gill that they're looking to decrease the taxi license fees now, and also for the rates. So that is included in this motion? They're looking at reducing the rates also? I didn't see it on this per se.
I'm not suggesting specifically what should come back in June.
So, well, I just want to know what I'm voting on. Are we voting that they will be looking at those things to help them out?
Councillor, the amendment only changes the time element in recommendation number 3 on the report, and the report specifically asks for measures to level the playing field. So that would encompass all available ways.
So it encompasses everything that the Mr. Gill has got as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure.
And we would also expect we can count on careful consultation with the taxi industry about the changes.
No, I agree with it. I do find it interesting because I remember it wasn't that long ago they were here asking for rate increase, so this is good news. I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's been an up and down ride for 10 years on the taxi industry, and you know, I've often reflected that the popular expression disruptive technology appears to have been that's a very well coined phrase to describe what seems to be happening on TNCs. All right, the motion before you, Council, is Councillor Adams' amendment to, I'll call it the hurry-up amendment to get the playing field leveled as much as possible by June 2017. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The amendment carries. And I will now put the motion by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Knoll, for the rest of the Administrative Services Committee report. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And the report is adopted. Council, we now come to the first discussion item on the agenda, And if you would give your attention to the Commissioner, I know that you've had, she'll introduce a presentation for the public, but I know that you've had a great deal of interest in this topic. I saw several of you at the public consultation that MPP Kevin Flynn, our Minister of Labor, arranged to be conducted here in Oakville, and so I know that everyone here is deeply involved in this. Madam Commissioner, would you like to make the appropriate introductions?
Certainly, Mayor and members of council. We have both Nadia, Chandra, as well as Diane Childs here to provide a presentation on both the legal and the planning aspects of the Ontario Municipal Board review.
Thank you. And Council, as you recall, this was deferred from a previous meeting of Council where we had time management issues, and it was determined that this could come over to this meeting because the deadline doesn't fall until the 19th of December. Ms. Childs, and away you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Discussion item 1 on your agenda is the Ontario Municipal Board review, and it's a joint report from Legal and Planning Services. The province sees a continuing need for the Ontario Municipal Board in the province's land use planning system, but is currently engaging in public consultation to review the OMB's scope and effectiveness. The purpose of the report before you this evening is to provide an overview of the province's consultation document and provide comments on the specific questions raised as part of the consultation document for consideration. The province released a review of the OMB document on October the 6th and held a number of workshops throughout the province, including one at Oakville's Town Hall on November the 3rd. The town did provide extensive input into Halton Area Planning Director's submission that went to Regional Council on November the 9th. Comments to the province are due December 19th. The province has identified 5 themes to the OMB review in the public consultation document that sets out possible changes being considered through a number of questions under each of the themes. The 5 themes are 1, OMB's jurisdiction and powers, 2, citizen participation and local perspective, 3, clear and predictable decision-making, 4, modern procedures and faster decisions, and 5, alternative dispute resolution and fewer hearings. Town staff support many of the province's proposed changes, but view 2 as fundamental in improving the OMB system. These being, firstly, changing the OMB's standard of review of municipal planning decisions, and secondly, scoping appeals and limiting what can be appealed to the OMB.
With respect to jurisdiction and power, changes under consideration would give more weight to local planning decisions. This is really where those fundamental changes are required. Although the board is required to have regard to council's decision, this has not been applied rigorously. Instead of hearing de novos where matters are considered fresh, one option under consideration is to change the standard of review to that of reasonableness. That is, whether the decision falls within a range of reasonable outcomes. Another option would be to establish an increased threshold where the board could only overturn the decision if the decision does not follow local or provincial policies. These changes would better reflect the extensive work that municipalities do, including extensive public consultation and as well as considerable engagement with the public and the considerable time that staff do reviewing planning decisions. A change in the standard of review would accord the appropriate deference to municipal planning decisions while balancing the need for a review process.
Watch me. The list of matters that cannot be appealed to the OMB should be broadened. Matters that are far too broad without legitimate planning justification need to be effectively scoped. Municipal refusal of a privately initiated official plan amendment should not be appealed to the OMB. Official plans establish a land use and built form context to guide development and redevelopment policies, which are prepared after extensive public engagement and input and built upon numerous detailed studies. The approval process focuses public input at the front end of the process, and any party that has participated in the planning process can appeal to the OMB. Once approved, the official plan should be allowed sufficient time to be implemented and guide development without the ability of individuals to amend these policies. Finally, interim control bylaws should not be appealed to the OMB in order to provide municipalities sufficient time to do comprehensive studies that result in informed planning recommendations rather than redirecting resources to prepare for an OMB hearing. With respect to citizen participation and local perspective, to assist citizens in understanding and participating in OMB hearings, there are a number of improvements that we have suggested to the province. Examples include providing clearer direction on options for participating in the OMB process, improving the board's website by making it easier to find relevant materials, and finally, providing access to view hearings or follow proceedings online rather than through expansive transcripts.
With respect to clear and predictable decision-making, the need for an increased number of OMB adjudicators has been consistently heard by the municipal bar. As well, requiring multi-member panels to conduct complex hearings would improve better planning decisions. With respect to modern procedures and faster decisions, there's a number of procedural improvements that are outlined in Appendix B to your report. Some examples include eliminating issues lists and instead provide a staggered exchange of all evidence with the requirement for the party who disputes the proposal that represents good planning serving first. Another option might be to empower municipalities to reject appeals received from those who did not make submissions, or establish a docket for multiple matters similar to the manner that court matters are scheduled so that multiple matters could be heard on the same day. Another option would be allowing municipalities to hear matters in a neighboring jurisdiction to save on the board's resources that are already limited.
Finally, with respect to the final theme, alternative dispute resolution and fewer hearings, staff sees the value of mediation and recommends increasing its use. Mediation takes time and requires voluntary parties who are willing to negotiate. If there is merit in an appeal and valid planning grounds, there's a greater opportunity of settling at mediation. The OMB should have dedicated resources to ensure that applications are reviewed for merit and scope. Appeals that have merit should be assessed for mediation and, if appropriate, a hearing. That ends our presentation, but we'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
I think you might get a few questions. Councillor Elger.
Thank you for the report. I'm a little concerned that at one point in the Halton's synopsis here, page 87 of my report, a municipality's refusal to amend a new secondary plan for 2 years. I would think 2 years is not the right number. That is, by the time you get the official plan approved, it takes so long. It's on, it's midway down on the recommendations under limit appeals to, and then it's note not allow appeals. So, but if it's after we're saying not 2 years, but it's okay for 3, 4, and 5 years they can appeal. I was wondering if it's possible we can modify that to read plan for 5 years unless the local council approves the new amendment.
Through your worship, I apologize. I'm having a hard time finding where exactly. Are you on this council agenda? On page?
Council agenda, page 86.
36.
Oh, okay.
87, I should say, 87. Under the key recommendations, it's roughly 2/3 of the way down the page, where it says, and it's got the 2 years, a municipality's refusal to amend a new secondary plan for 2 years.
Through your worship to Councillor Elgar, this is the HAP submission. It's my understanding.
That's right.
It was discussed at Halton Region, and so it has been submitted to the province. If the town would like to do an amendment to this, it would have to be under a separate letter.
And that's what I'm wondering, if we said 5 years, unless this council approved, like, I just think that 2 years isn't very long when you get a new official plan. It's pretty hot off the press. So I'd like to see it for 5 years, and add another 3, unless local council approves the amendment. I think we should raise the flag on that anyhow.
Councillor, would it work for you to add to the staff recommendation that the mayor be authorized to write a supplemental letter urging that change?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could put it as a recommendation 3 in the report, and put that in, that the mayor will write a letter authorizing that change from 2 to 5 years.
I'd be only too glad to do that. Any other questions?
Well, I'm just concerned about, we talk about the public input, and I guess I've been around for 16 years now. What I'm finding is that the OMB, especially, the public can come out and they can talk about their issues and what they don't like. It doesn't really matter, and we know that. And you'll hear the OMB chair, as she just said a couple of weeks ago, I have to listen to the technical expertise. So, you know, I think something's missing here between the public, getting the public to come out and sign up and be participants. I feel it's quite a waste of time, the way this process works right now, because the OMB chair wrapped it up and said, well, you realize I have to listen to the technical experts. And anybody that comes up and just has a gut feel of what they don't like or what they like, they get ripped apart by the other side, by the development side. Like, are you authorized? What's your qualifications? So at the end of the day, the participant feels like they've just basically been whipped, and then walk away thinking, wow, that was an experience I'll never do again. So, like, I don't know what we can do, but I think something is fundamentally missing right now with the whole process. And one of the lawyers for the developers of the recent OMB case, she got up and asked, when somebody asked what's the public input? The public input, she said, was the vision of Oakville, and that was it. It was the vision, whatever's in the vision. And I was quite surprised to hear that. I'd never heard that before in my life, but apparently that's the only public input you had. Whatever is put into the vision of Oakville, that's the public input. So I don't know what staff can do to address that, but the system isn't working for the residents.
Through your worship, I think one thing I would say is I think that's one of the reasons why they are reviewing the process, because the actual OMB process can be very intimidated to the general public. So they are looking at ways to how can they make it better, and they tried to come up with questions to get some assistance with that. How can they make it better to the general public and make the process a little bit easier to understand? So they are trying through this document.
They're trying, but what they should be telling you might as well hire a certified planner or a lawyer if you're going to have much merit. Ms. Closey.
Mr. Mayor, to you, Councillor Elgar, what I'd add to Diane Childs is that I think the most important place to start is not to have it in front of the board. And that's what these documents are suggesting, is to really scope down what can be in front of the board so that you can have that public participation and that input here at council rather than having the matter done all at the board. So I think that's the first focus of this, and that's the most important part in terms of the OMB reform. And because once you get to an intermunicipal board hearing, it is a quasi-court type of system, and so you want to build the input at the front end.
Well, okay, and that's where I'm actually wanting to get to, because legally the OMB is doing what they're allowed to do because of the Planning Act. Like, so the root is back to the Planning Act, which allows the people to do what they want to do in the development industry. And I don't know whether we can put that in too. Like, fundamentally, legally, everybody's doing everything right, but it's just not working, in my opinion. And unless the OMB, we can play with it and tweak it, but until we change the Provincial Planning Act, it's not going to be very helpful to any of us, I don't think, for yourselves and any people that live in any municipality in Ontario. So those are my comments. I don't know, Mayor, whether we can put that in also, because I don't think the Planning Act is even being looked at right now. It was looked at a while ago, so I'm concerned about that. But anyway, I thank you for the report, and I realize it was a joint report for all the municipalities and the conservation authorities. So,
thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Ms. Chandra and Ms. Childs, for this report. My question is regarding the 5 key themes identified by the province. Reading through the report, I didn't see that there was a prioritization, but generally, as we know, when decisions come up, there's priorities. Do you anticipate that there'll be a ranking order, even though they're mentioned 1 to 5 here, with respect to what's very high on their agenda to change or reform, versus we're just going to put these 5 things and see what sticks?
Through you, Mayor Burton, there does not appear to be any priority given, but the purpose of the consultation has been indicated to review the scope and effectiveness, and in my opinion, that does come back to theme 1 regarding jurisdiction and powers of the board.
Do we not want to make that somewhat, I guess, the highlight of our report as well?
Councillor, I would suggest to you that if you look at the weight of our recommendations, that's exactly where we're focused. And jurisdiction and scope are, in fact, the only alternative we have to outright abolition of the board. If you can't abolish the board, you try to abolish some of the things that it deals with that it doesn't handle appropriately in our view. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through your worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just building on a couple of the other speakers, I do totally agree with the commissioner. We shouldn't have it, period. Things should be at the local level, but I do also agree with Councillor Elgar in regards to the perception that public have that their comments and their views and their concerns are really going to be heard at an OMB hearing, and they seem to be totally dismissed in that process. The only thing I thought remotely looked encouraging was the one on 102, where there's maybe opportunities to include a citizen participant, non-impacted, to provide community perspective. Because the thing I've had a problem with from the get-go with the Ontario Municipal Board is one person who doesn't reside in our community making a decision for us and overruling a duly elected body. And that's the other thing I have a problem with an OMB, is that regardless of what government of the day is, it's an appointment versus elected. And so there seems to be no accountability for that Ontario Municipal Board officer in terms of their decisions or the, what shall I say, validity of their decisions. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much, guys, for the report. And when I was reading through it, I was curious why there's no comments with regards to the costs to filing an appeal at the board. I did read that the province only gets something like 8% of the costs associated with it back. They recently changed the appeal fee from $125 to $300. I'm well aware that the implications of an OMB hearing are very expensive, but it seems quite frivolous just to throw $300 at something and file an appeal. We know that sometimes getting, when we tell people recouping full cost, is what we're doing, and there are some hindrance to people when they see the actual cost. So I'm wondering why, or if that's something you feel would be beneficial to getting vexatious. Well, they're not vexatious; they're people's rights, but maybe it might hinder some people to respect the decisions of council if we were to recommend that the province even recoup 50 or 75% of their costs in terms of an OMB appeal. I'm just wondering what your thoughts or comments might be on that.
Councillor, I think maybe I could help you with that. At the public consultation that the province conducted here in Oakville, our member of the legislature, Minister Flynn, gave a concluding set of remarks at the end of the evening in which he touched on the province's view that there are many cases, he said, where citizens bring actions at the board to try to overturn decisions by council with which they do not agree. And I also had the opportunity to discuss this with the Attorney General earlier last month. And their view is that they don't want to make if they raise the fee too high, they cut off access to justice for individuals who may be aggrieved by a decision of their council. And I know in Oakville it seems hard to believe that there would be a community where things would be essentially the reverse of what we have here. But our member, Kevin Flynn, who has served for, I think, 13 years in the legislature and 18 years in this chamber before, assured us that that was the case. So that's why the fee question is a little bit, it has extra implications that aren't immediately apparent.
Thank you, Your Worship. I mean, I'm aware. I know there are different people who appeal for different reasons. I'm wondering if there's not, some sort of a little more complicated scale or system of working that out. I'm not sure what that is, but anyway, I appreciate the response to that. Thank you.
If it's of any comfort to you, there was in the discussion with the Attorney General, zero appetite for a more complicated or more expensive scale. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully endorse this report. Curious in terms of next steps and timing. The province is going to be receiving all of this information. Will there be an additional round of consultation if the ultimate goal is revisions to the Planning Act? I don't expect that would happen quickly. Just curious in terms of the process from here. There are a lot of people really curious about it.
So we've been told that the proposals, which will obviously be legislative, will be brought forward in the new year. And as you know, they will then be the subject of hearings by committees in public. And there's a well-established system of their version of our process of delegating, where witnesses sign up to come and testify for and against different parts of draft legislation.
Appreciate that. And public hearings in the spring, hopefully?
I join you in that hope.
Thanks.
And I have no information to contradict that hope.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I was in attendance at the Town Hall public meeting, and a representative from the ministry did indicate that the amendments would be brought forward in the new year. She did sound that it was coming very shortly.
Councillor Elgar.
A quick question. Any chance we could also throw in there that whatever is approved at the OMP, that it rolls back to any current OMB hearings? In process at this point, where there's new rules and they should go with the most current rules when they're doing something? Does staff have any view on that from a legal perspective?
So, Councillor, help us understand that. There was an item in the discussion paper where the province asked, were we of the view that old applications, when they do finally come to a hearing, should they be subject to the rules in place when the application was made, or should the latest provincial policies with regard to good planning apply to the old application? Is that what you're asking about?
That's what I'm asking. If there's an OMB case in process, it has started, but the new rules come in, we should ask for the new rules to be in effect from the date they become effective.
So so that question is asked in the discussion paper, and I believe there's an answer provided here. And
I
I
think,
just
that-
need,
and I think you might find that if it's already in process, it wouldn't apply. But let's have a quick word. I can't figure, I'm not sure just where that is right now, but I think it'd be very progressive if we said we should go with the latest information available from the OMB.
well, I thought the clear sense of the public meeting in Oakville was to apply the latest and greatest, best good planning policies.
Yes.
And I will volunteer to add that to my letter.
That would be great, because there could be ones in process and everything would just be on a freeze and then have to relook at it and see whether it was truly a case going forward.
All right.
That'd be fun, good to throw that into the mix, I think.
Well,
That'd be good.
when I write a letter, I do more than throw it in, but
Okay.
I'll do you proud. How's that?
Okay, I appreciate that. I thank you.
That being said, are there other questions? If there are no questions, is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Lapworth is moving, and Councillor Chisholm is seconding. Shall I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Is that with Elgar's additional
Pardon?
Is that with Elgar's additional
Yes. Yes. You captured it all, right? So the two things. All right, Council, I invite your attention to item number 2, the Oakville Enterprises Corporation Quarterly Report and Authorization Report. And I think we can turn with pride and expectation to the CEO, Mr. Rob Lister, for his information.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present another update from Oakville Enterprises and Oakville Hydro. This evening I have with me John Mitchell, who is a member of our board of directors and chair of our finance and audit committee, Mike Brown, chief operating officer of Oakville Hydro, Scott Moody, chief operating officer of Energy and Infrastructure Services, and Simon Abbott, VP of Human Resources. I have a brief presentation this evening. I'd like to start off with the components, an illustration of the components of the electricity bill over time. And I'd like to highlight the portion that is Oakville Hydro. Now, the hydro bill is composed of the electricity commodity, which is the biggest part, the green band, which is the regulation agency's cost, the blue band is the transmission charge, that's for Hydro One's transmission system, and then the distribution charge is the red band, which represents the Oakville Hydro electricity distribution charge, which represents about 18% of the bill, about $27 per month per residential customer. The provincial average usage in a month is now down at 750 kilowatt hours. It was at 800, but due to conservation across the province, it's down. So at 750 kilowatt hours per month for Oakville resident, that's about $150 per month total bill, of which Oakville Hydro's contribution, as I said, is $27. I highlight that the Oakville Hydro portion has been very flat over the last 15 years. The big increases, again, have come from the commodity portion, which is purchased from the independent electricity system operator. With the 8% provincial rebate coming in effect on January 1st, the average residential and small commercial bills will be about $11 less per month. And as reported in October, all our customers are now on monthly bills, billing for the electricity portion of their bill, and the water bill is every second month. As reported, on November 16th, we held an open house to explain our tree trimming program. We're focusing on Zone 2. Zone 2 is bounded by the QEW, Fourth Line, and Chartwell. We started in Zone 2 and we'll be carrying on through into the spring. We have about 8,000 trees to manage in each zone of the trees that were in the vicinity of the electric lines. And as you know, tree contact with lines, and especially the overhanging branches, are major causes of outages, power interruptions. And we prune the trees every 3 years throughout the town of the trees that are impacted by the lines. And on September 29th, we hosted a large customer session at the independent electricity system operator and provided them a session on the electricity market and the provincial grid. I'd like to turn now to just an overview on Oakville Enterprises. To refresh council on our business activities, here's an illustration of our 4 lines of business and the various brands that we operate under. Our 4 lines are electricity distribution, which is Oakville Hydro, infrastructure services, energy services, and generation. My next 3 slides highlight our renewable energy portfolio in the generation line of business. We have the landfill gas power plant at the Halton Waste Management Facility, the hydraulic power plant on Lake Kagawan. We have the Sunny Shores Solar Farm in Picton, and this has been a very good year for solar generation due to the sunny, long summer. And in the town, we have 5 rooftop solar installations. We have the River Oaks Community Center, 16 Mile Creek Sports Complex, Glen Abbey Recreation Center, the Town Hall, and the Oakville Hydro Building. And we have 5 geo-exchange installations. We have Ironstone in Burlington, the Eddy in Ottawa, the Oakville Hydro Building, Union Lofts in Toronto, and Seasons in Burlington. And to just finish off my presentation, here's a photo of our staff who participated in the Santa Claus Parade. I'm on the far left there. We supported the downtown Oakville tree lighting ceremony, and we've had great support from staff on the United Way Oakville campaign this year. And that completes my presentation. I'm just happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, and we were all very gratified when the tree lit when the switch was thrown.
Good,
That reflected well on all kinds of organization and elves at work. Councillor Lapworth?
Thank you for the report, Mr. Lister. I believe I received my first monthly hydro bill a few weeks ago. My question is, with the additional administrative handling of the money coming in versus the increased cash flow, is that a net positive or net negative effect on you?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Net negative for the moment. The capital costs and operating costs in order to move to monthly billing are not offset by the increased cash flow. Now, we are continue to push for e-billing, and we have a number of different programs every few months and to increase that. And we're now up to, I think, 17,000 customers that are on e-billing, and about a third of our customers are on automatic prepayment. So we continue to push for those, which reduces our operating costs.
Mr. Lister, you may want perhaps to mention that the shift to monthly was a provincial requirement.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was the Ontario Energy Board from the Government of Ontario mandated all utilities to move to monthly billing for the electricity bill.
Councillor Chisholm.
Mr. Lister, just a quick question with respect to the tree pruning, and it seems to be a real issue in our ward. A lot of descriptive lines have come through from my email saying what we're butchers and we're hacking and going on and on and on about it. For clarity's sake, the town does the tree pruning and clearing for hydro?
Oakville Hydro retains the town to do the tree trimming around the lines, correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Suggestion, when this tree pruning and clearing happens, can we have some type of communication to the residents and the requirements and why we're doing it, and we're doing the best possible job in maintaining our trees to the utmost care? Unfortunately, there are a lot of residents who are very concerned on how it's being performed. So in future, if we can look at that as a communication piece prior to tree pruning?
We can certainly, we can do better. We do have an open house, and we do communicate within the zones that we are trimming, but we certainly could do more. I understand the challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Lister.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Lister. My question is about cap and trade. I really appreciated the, can you go back to slide number 2 or 3, I think? There you go. This was very useful, actually. Do you anticipate seeing a section where it's going to show the cost of the cap and trade program?
On the electricity bill, you won't see a cap and trade cost. It won't show up as a line item, and there is controversy around the natural gas bill where they're not going to show it on the natural gas bill either. But there will be a charge on the natural gas bill for the cap and trade cost, or the carbon cost, but not on the electricity bill.
And so you mentioned the $11 per month going down. That's the HST component?
That's equivalent to the PST of the GST, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we won't be able to see, we'll just see a higher amount.
Oh,
on our bill.
you'll see you'll see that credit, yes. And they're calling it the provincial rebate. The 8% provincial rebate is the official terminology, and that line item will be on the hydro bill come January.
But we're not going to see this type of information from that program specifically?
You will see that line item, yes.
Yes, the HST, but not the cap and trade.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
So, Councillor, I don't know if it was clear. The province's climate change strategy attempts to shift people to electricity because it's not a carbon power source, right? So the theory is that you won't have a cap and trade charge on your electricity bill. You'll have it on carbon, not on electricity. So it's not like, so there won't be a charge on your bill for cap and trade.
But our bill will be much higher because we are being shifted towards electricity. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I see that in what we've seen, but perhaps you know better than
I don't. That's why I was asking Mr. Lister.
Yeah. So what Mr. Lister was saying was there's no cap and trade charge for electricity. That's why it's not on the bill.
So do you anticipate a percentage higher than the HST that the rebate program is with respect to the usage of electricity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this time it would be more of an individual basis. So if you moved off natural gas in your home because you wanted to avoid the carbon tax on your personal natural gas bill, then and converted to electric heat, then your electricity bill would go up. But it won't be as a result of the tax moving over.
Right. If there are no other questions, would anyone like to move and second the recommendation? Councillor Knoll moves. Councillor Hutchins seconds. Shall I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you very much to everyone for another stellar performance. Council, I invite your attention to item number 3, the 2016 Strategic Plan Accomplishments Report from Strategy, Policy, and Communications, and the recommendation there. As I understand it, staff will make a more detailed report when we look at the annual revision and updating of our strategic plan in the new year. And unless you have questions, I would entertain a motion and a second. Councillor Elger.
Yeah. It's like we're going to be going out and doing a survey. It's like midterm. When I read through this, what the town is going to be doing, accomplishments. And I wonder if we could add one item to when they're doing the survey and ask, in your opinion, is the town of Oakville controlling growth? To get a feel for what the residents think we are doing. If we could add that one question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we actually do survey that particular question. We ask them in terms of controlling the rate of growth. Is that what the importance they place on that? So we already are measuring that.
Fantastic. I thank you for that. I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Can I find a second? Councillor Lapworth. It's a Ward 4 moment. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's adopted. Council, I now ask your attention to the Federal Infrastructure Program's Incrementality Rules resolution, which I've put before you. And I would like to offer a small word of explanation. For a year, the province and the mayors in the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario and the mayors and regional chairs of Ontario, which is Marco and Lumco, as well as the Big City Mayors of Canada, which is FCM, and AMO, have been negotiating with the federal government on their announced federal infrastructure program spending rules. And we've been through phase 1, we've been through a separate wastewater and stormwater program, and we are coming up on phase 2. And the information that I have provided you in the report and in the resolution come from those sources, and this resolution was crafted in a collaborative way by all of the heads of council of the GTHA, and then distributed to all of the municipalities of Ontario. And Friday, Lumco and Marco met again, and the negotiators from the province briefed us, and there has been no change in the federal position, which I will quote to you, having been told it by the Ontario desk of the Minister of Infrastructure, and I quote, there are two statements. The rules for Phase 2 have not been set, three statements. The rules have not been set for Phase 2. We recognize the concern of the municipalities, and we will continue to talk with you about trying to accommodate you. And 3, there will be no federal money without new municipal money, quote unquote. And as is explained in the report, there's a problem with that. And the heads of council of the GTHA are unanimous that this has to change in order for infrastructure spending to proceed. Now, as I understand it, the federal worry is that if they don't have their rule that there's no federal money without new municipal money, they're afraid that cities and towns might use federal infrastructure money to basically reduce their property tax. And under the terms of the negotiations that we've been ongoing for a year, everyone is committed that would not happen. In Windsor, in August, at AMO, Lumco and Marco had a joint meeting with the federal government's negotiators, and we had this out extensively. The fundamental problem is that the federal government does not understand municipal finance. They believe that if an item is in a 10-year capital forecast, it's funded. But in reality, outside of Oakville, for sure, the fact that something is in a 10-year forecast only means that they hope to find the funding for it, not that it is funded. So an item is fundable, if you will. In a meeting that a teleconference meeting that I participated in, thanks to the assistance of MPs John Oliver of the Oakville riding and Pam Demoff of the Burlington North Oakville, or the Oakville North Burlington riding. It's a new riding, I haven't memorized the name yet. With the Ontario desk person for the ministry, the statement I'm quoting, no federal money without new municipal finance, was repeated twice verbatim as to what I said here. But I want to thank I want to thank both MPs for arranging the meeting, and I want to especially single out for thanks MP John Oliver, who, after listening to my report of what the unanimous position of the heads of council of the GTHA is, he said, and I quote, with great admiration and gratitude, he said this: "Now I see what the mayors are concerned about. This is just like the 10-year capital budgeting problem that I had when I was running the hospitals. I had a list of 10 years of projects, but I had no idea whether we would actually be able to get them or build them, because we never knew from one year to the next where the money was going to come from." And that's a peculiarity of the way the health system works in our province. We have, in Oakville, a system where we rank all of our needed capital projects by priority. Sometimes we disagree about the priority, Councillor O'Meara, and we want something sooner than other people want, but we rank them by priority. And then we build them in that priority. the rule has been offered up by the federal government that maybe I'll just cut to the chase. What I believe will solve the problem is if the federal government will permit bumping forward of projects from the 10-year capital list. That would produce new spending in the year bumped into, and they would get incrementality. And the problem has really boiled down to, we believe, because this is all of the heads of council, has boiled down to a failure to understand that if it's out there in year 9, it isn't funded. And they prefer to believe that it is. Once upon a time in Canada, budgets were called estimates, and we, you know, in our ceaseless quest to sound like we're more businesslike, we now call everything budgets, and that adds this layer, it adds this surface of, you know, exactitude to what really is a forecast. So with that, to set the stage, I look forward to your questions. Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I guess we all got a letter from both the MP Oliver and Demoff today. And in that, like, the phase 1 was the first 2 years of the funding, and that is closed. From what I'm reading, what has been stated here, if it's the final 8 years, the 10-year program, it's they can be brought forward and are eligible. And I'm just concerned that I think we got a very good working relationship with our federal representatives in Oakville here, and I wonder whether we should just kind of let this, not do anything with this, what you've got at this point, and wait and see what does come out of the phase 2, because they say they want to work with the mayor and council, and that they, you know, they know there's a few things to be done yet, but not to kind of kick them, you know, not to kind of kick them right now. Let's work together. And I think, you know, I guess when I think that it was MP Demoff apparently that came to us and offered us to give us money for water and wastewater project, which we hadn't applied for. So I hate to give them a kick when they've already been helping us. That's the only thing. I wonder if it's just a little early and maybe try to work with the federal at this point.
Councillor, this is an ongoing file that's been going on for a year. Neither of our MPs are involved in the negotiations. There's 2 statements in the letter which kind of cancel each other out. One is the rules haven't been set, and the other is that you will be able to bring projects forward. And that kind of cancels, you know, if the rules haven't been set, then how do you know you can bring projects forward? As of Friday, the official version from the, you know, from the scene of the negotiations, as opposed to our local wanting to be helpful MPs, is that there's been no progress. So I don't really regard this as kicking. I regard this as helping. I regard this as the heads of council of the municipalities of Ontario trying to send a clear signal that they need to bend and they need to make adjustments, and they have refused up to now. So it's council's pleasure to pass or not pass the resolution, but I would ask for a recorded vote, and I will continue to ask you to adopt the resolution. I think it's important. Tonight, in many municipalities in Ontario, this motion is being put to councils. The same or similar motion is before the regional council tomorrow, Wednesday, and I think it's important. And the value of the resolution, which has been carefully crafted by all the players on the municipal side, is that it provides, I think, very careful clarity to the federal government about what it needs to change. So I would ask you to support the motion.
I appreciate that, and when we get to item 7, it's going to get more interesting when we look at the Mayor McCallion report also, when I read through that in detail. It scared me a little bit, so we'll be coming to that, but it kind of sets the stage for you. We've got to read the minutes very carefully, I think, as Mayor Parrish did.
Are there other questions? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just want to clarify here. So the letter that we all received from both of our MPs in Oakville here, where they said municipal projects that are fully funded in the next 2 years are not eligible, but projects that are either not fully funded or in the last 8 years of your 10-year plan can be brought forward and are eligible. You're saying that's not clear, or that's not true?
I'm saying it on Friday at the briefing of Lumco and Marco. We were told that that's not correct. And I invite you to consider that the letter also says the rules haven't been set yet. So it's either set or it's not set.
Okay.
The best part of the letter is that both our MPs have offered to support us and help us work this out with the federal government. And so there's a net positive here, in my view. And all we're doing is providing the clarity that good negotiation needs in order to get to a resolution.
I understand and I respect that. I also know that sometimes getting in bed with other municipalities who have other agendas and other relationships with their own federal members sometimes doesn't necessarily serve Oakville's relationships with our federal MPs very well. Over the past, I'm sure we can all look back and find varied relationships as a municipal partner with federal government. So, you know, I have heard that this doesn't help. Our MPs get done what they need to do when it ends up on a staffer's desk in the minister's office. And having been on that side of the fence before, I can understand how sometimes these things, as well-intentioned as they may be, end up not being so well received by the 20-something-year-olds who present those things. So I kind of echo Councillor Elgar's cautions in these sorts of things. And I know Lumco and the big city mayors get together and discuss these things, and you do an incredible job representing us there. But again, I think Oakville needs to remember what's important for Oakville and our relationships as we have them. So I'll leave it with that, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to be clear. What's at stake is a negotiated agreement between the province of Ontario and the federal government, because the cities are creatures of the province, and so there's a protocol that the federal government and the provinces all go through. So this is not a case where the individual members of parliament can go and get money for the city. This is a case where a written agreement between two orders of government, the provinces and the feds, is going to govern what's going to happen. And that is where the difficulty has been. And what we're doing here is we're joining with our others, if we pass it, we're joining with our fellow municipalities to say to the federal government, you've failed to understand municipal financing, and please correct and adjust. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad to see in the correspondence that the ministry has informed us that they have also heard from provinces, territories, and municipalities across the country. So it's not just an Ontario, concern. Are you aware of our counterparts across Canada where they're going to be sharing similar motions at their councils?
We determined to distribute our model resolution outside Ontario at Friday's meeting, and we haven't done that yet. So I'm not aware of any outside Ontario. This has been, for us, an Ontario issue. However,
it's clearly a concern across Canada, however.
Oh, yes, everyone. The reason it's a special Ontario concern, though, is Ontario is the only province with a full-blown asset management planning approach for its municipalities that we're all required to follow.
Yeah.
And that we happen to be a leader in the achievement of. As far as I know, no other municipalities actually reached the stage where their asset management plans can be said to be either funded or fundable. And that's because of our strong municipal financial condition.
I appreciate the details.
I will tell you that in the conversation with the minister's Ontario desk on Thursday, I was asked if the mayors would invite the minister to a meeting to try to thrash this out, and we issued, the heads of council issued that invitation immediately after the meeting. And we heard Friday that that meeting, their people and our people are searching for a mutually convenient date. So for that reason alone, I think it's important to pass the resolution. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't see this as a, what shall I say, prodding or kicking. I see it as reinforcing the good work that our local, or our Oakville and Oakville North Burlington representatives are doing and have done, and I perceive will continue to do on our behalf. We're just giving them a little bit more, what shall I say, support, so that when they go into their caucus discussions, they can say, yes, I've heard loud and clear from our municipality and our region that this is important to them. And again, I look at the fact they reached out to you to talk to you. So obviously they do want to understand, and they do want to be able to advocate on our behalf. So I don't see any problem with this.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. Councillor Adams.
I was part of the discussion last week about this, and I do want to thank both members of our members of Parliament for Oakville. They were instrumental in bringing forward awareness about the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund application that we could make, and it is an important fund. It is providing a couple $2 million in funding to us. It is new money, and it is money that requires us to in part match. So in our case, we have reserves that allow us to do that. Other municipalities might not. So it's not so much of a hill for us. But the issue of incrementality is an important one. In the current program, they have, I'll say, waived the rules and allowed us to use our existing asset management plan. But as the mayor has said, if those rules weren't waived in the future and we were required to bring net new projects in to make use of their funding, we'd be choosing projects that weren't our priority. And I think that would be an issue. And I do think we have to have a discussion. I do think that there was a little bit of misunderstanding perhaps on their part when we were talking about the incrementality and what we meant by it. And so I think we've clarified that in our discussions, and I think that was a very healthy discussion, and I'm confident we'll continue with that kind of healthy, collaborative type of discussion in the future. So I think we do need to thank the mayor for forcing this discussion upon the federal government, along with all the other mayoral colleagues that he's been working with, because I think it's an important one to make sure that when that very large pool of Phase 2 funding starts to be divvied out, that it's done in a way that we can work with it. And when I say we, I don't just mean Oakville, I mean all the municipalities.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar again.
I'll support the motion. Going forward, I think if Mayor Burton, if you could bring them into the tent first, like advise what you're going to be doing on a Monday night, and they read it in the Beaver, I think it might be helpful if you pick up the phone and give them a call.
Thank you very much for the very kind suggestion. If there are no other questions or debate, I will call the vote. To be recorded in favor of this resolution, please rise to be named. Oh, I need a seconder. Councillor Lischina. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Meara. Thank you, Council. That is unanimous. Now, Council, if you would turn to item 5, Councillor Lischina and I are bringing before you a proposal to honor our veterans, and I invite your comments or questions. Would you like me to put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you very much. I know this means a lot to our veterans, and it will be a cause of cheer in our legions. It's with a great deal of pleasure that I now put before you a proposal for a ceremonial street sign, seconded by Councillor Grant, who unfortunately isn't here, and I wonder if I need a substitute, Madam Clerk. And if so, let's put Councillor Knoll, his ward mate. Councillor Matheson is a resident of Ward 5, or the Mathesons are. And this is to honor Diana Matheson for her outstanding Olympic career. And I would invite any comments there if anyone has any. Councillor Adams.
I'm just so excited to be able to put up a street sign for Diana. She's been a stalwart member of our soccer club for years, and we're really proud of her.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd forgotten you're a soccer player. That's right. All right, and if there are no other speakers, I will ask you to vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously, and congratulations again to not only Diana Matheson, but her family. They must be proud. Now we come to Councillor Elgar's foreshadowed event, item number 7, the response to the McCallion report on the coordinated land review. And so Council, maybe a little bit of stage setting would help you here. Former Mayor McCallion is a very accomplished and highly esteemed municipal leader, and she was appointed by the Premier to be a special advisor to her on the four reviews that we've just gone through this year. And she earlier this year convened a summit to discuss the proposals that have come forth from the province in response to the four-plan review. And her strategy was to, her tactics were to send it out to all of the mayors who participated in her summit, and for that matter, all the other mayors in Ontario, and ask them as mayors to co-sign her report as recommendation to the province. And because Mayor Parrish and I, as co-chairs, along with Councillor de Beermaker in Toronto, have problems with some of what is in Mayor McCallion's report, Mayor Parrish chose to write a, let me call it his own letter, and what I chose to do was to bring it to you, asking you to endorse substantially the same thing as Mayor Parrish has said. And I do that not with any wish to quarrel with Mayor McCallion, but only to look after a couple of fine points in her report with which I do not believe you would agree, and I could not bring myself to agree. So, Councillor Elgar, you indicated you had some comments.
First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for bringing this report to us. I just trying to understand, Mayor, like this February of 2015, we started the municipal affairs, the 4 reviews, and then we got the revised drafts in May 2016, and the dead end date was September of this year, and then they bumped it to the end of October. Now her report comes out in November, which I'm trying to figure out, like when I look at the number of people that attended that event at the end of September, and the report comes out in November after the end of all the discussion, and the things that are in there, I'm trying to figure out who, I was trying to figure out who could have written that report. And I'm really happy that Mayor Parrish put pen to paper and that you picked up on it and got a copy of it, and then you're bringing it to us because, in addition to what you're moving, I think we should send a thank you letter to Mayor Parrish for highlighting it's ridiculous, some of the things that are in there, because they want to take, especially in the Greenbelt, take the control away from the province and give it back to the municipalities. Like there's a few things in here that are, it was shocking. And I really wonder, when you attended the meeting, were they coming up and talking like that? Like were the mayors and councillors all saying that things and singing in harmony?
I would resist characterizing it that way. What I would say is there were several points of agreement. The idea that you would shift, like the most. So no, there wasn't complete harmony. I think it's a simple answer. I just want to point out that Mayor Parrish's letter basically builds on a joint letter that Councillor DeBearmaker and Mayor Parrish and I wrote within the time frame as co-chairs of the municipal leaders for the Greenbelt. And so this will be reinforcing of the municipal leaders for the Greenbelt submission, assuming that you will support this. And for the sake of the declarative value of having a recorded vote, perhaps you'd be willing to have a recorded vote on this as well.
I absolutely would want a recorded vote on this. Maybe, and also just to send a thank you letter back to him, if you don't mind.
I will be glad to do that.
Thank you.
I've tried to help you understand that what he's done is taken the thing that Glenn DeBearmaker and he and I wrote and put it in his letter. So we'll thank all three of us, shall we? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Adams?
I want to echo Councillor Elgar's comments. I have some significant issues with the way in which the report was drafted, and I much prefer some of the comments that Mayor Parrish has put into his letter. I think there are some very high risks of choosing to pave over additional green space that doesn't need to be paved over should we follow the original drafted report.
Thank you, Councillor. If there are no other speakers, I'll call the vote to be recorded in favor. Please rise to be named. I believe Councillor Elgar seconded. Or wait, no, we need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Adams. And now we'll do the naming. Thank you again, Madam Clerk. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, and Councillor O'Meara. Thank you, Council. That is unanimous. Now, we have no confidential discussion items. We have no advisory committee minutes, and your information items have been circulated electronically as per normal. You have your status of outstanding issues, and we have a bit of new business, and that is the motion by myself and Councillor Lischina in consideration of Haitian disaster relief for the January 30th council meeting. And I believe we also have a request for report here, which I know I saw a second ago. Here it is. And you all should have this on your desk. And this is moved by Councillor Hutchins and seconded by Councillor Adams that staff be requested to report back to council on options available to the Oakville Fire Department to enhance medical response capacity by treating victims of overdose due to heroin laced with fentanyl. Now, I'm fine with the request for report, and we'll see what comes back. This is a deep well of a subject, and there are many things to be considered, and I'm confident that a report that is returned will illuminate the pitfalls and the hidden trapdoors in going down this road. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and the request is approved. If there's no other business, there are Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. This Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, we will be presenting the awards to the winners from this year's Oakville Santa Claus Parade, and we look forward to doing that. I had hoped to maybe have an opportunity to have MP DeMoff here at some point, but unfortunately she's as busy as all get out as usual, and consequently she wasn't able to be here. I wanted to publicly thank her for all her hard work over the years. As you can understand, now that she's our federal representative for Oakville North Burlington, is no longer able to chair the Santa Claus Parade, and I don't know whether it's good luck, but I've taken over the position. But she has given so much time and effort over the years. She's done it all so much with a cheery disposition, no matter how hairy things got. And I just think we all owe her a debt of gratitude for her hard work. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. You know, she built a wonderful foundation on which you just conducted an outstanding parade. And I have to tell you that I've heard from all corners of town that it was the best parade ever. So I hope that this praise that is coming in from around the town will encourage you to keep doing it. Because I know it's a lot of work and you never get, I mean, Councillor, do you feel like you get too much praise in your life? Exactly. So, Council, I need a mover and seconder for the bylaws, including the revisions to 2016-83, which is the TNC bylaw. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Robinson. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That completes a very meaty agenda, and I thank you for your time and attention and your very good work and your great questions. This is the final meeting of the year, so please permit me to say Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And as always, I have to say, it has been great working with you, and I look forward to many more years. Thank you. We are adjourned.